Welcome to Limeworks TV. We're by the seaside with a rare air-cooled gem. In this video then we're going to be finding out everything there is to know about the rare 911 Carrera 3. Alright then, I need to be quick because typically with this being the UK, it's going to rain, biblically so, in around about 2 hours. So what with this car behind me being a Targa variant, we need to get it shot. 2024 marks 50 years, half a century of what is now the iconic impact bumper 911. So we should start with 1974 when the 911 was overhauled. Gone was the model lineup of 911 T, E and S, replaced with 911 for the entry level, 911S for the middle car, and then 911 Carrera for the top level, okay? The 911 was also reprofiled, it got impact bumpers. What are impact bumpers? Well, they're these basically. Front and rear of the car, you've got chunkier bumpers, which thanks to US legislation, meant that the cars had to withstand crash impacts of up to 5 miles an hour. Now that design stayed basically for 15 years from 1974 to 1989. That's why these cars are called G-bodied or G-series. G-bodied is correct, G-series isn't, because G-series basically means one model year only, and that was 1974. G-bodied is because the cars ostensibly stayed the same. There are minor changes, obviously, and we'll dive into those a little bit later on, but G-bodied is kind of what we're looking at here. That's what this represents, okay? Now, the G-bodied or impact bumper era, as these cars, this shape and this design is colloquially known, lasted for 15 model years, 1974 to 1989. There were just under 200,000 of them made for worldwide markets. It's one of the most popular generations of 911. Now, the most popular models within that impact bumper era are the SC and the 3.2 Carrera, lasting from 78 to 83 and 84 to 89 respectively. But before the SC and the 3.2 Carrera, you had 4 years of impact bumper models that are less well known, just as desirable and just as fun to drive. We'll cover the 74 and 75 model year cars another time because there really is lots to learn there. Today we'll focus on 76 and 77 because that was the era of this, the 3-litre cars. Again, super quirky era of 911 history. It's the first time the 911's engine capacity went up to 3 litres for its road cars. There were 3 911s in the lineup, the iconic turbo sat at the top, and then for the naturally aspirated offerings you had just 2, the entry-level 911 and then this, the Carrera 3-litre. The Carrera 3-litre, as seen here, was basically the 930 turbo's engine without the turbocharger. And when you open up the back of this car and you're looking at the iconic air-cooled flat 6, the fan, front and centre of the engine bay, is a 5-blade fan. By the turn of the SC, the car that would eventually replace this in 1978, Porsche would go back to what we know as the iconic 11-blade fan, taking this 5-blade away, okay? So if you ever sit in a pub quiz and somebody asks, and that'd be a hell of a pub quiz by the way, which model year of 911 had the 5-blade fan in the back, it's a Carrera 3 and you can owe me a beer for having the answer. We'll pause it there because it's raining and we need to get the roof on this. So let's go for a drive and dive into the history of the Carrera 3 in a little bit more detail and find out why it's special. Well, you can always rely on the good old British weather, can't you? Particularly when you've got a lovely Targa to drive, but it's not meant to be. So the wet weather means my cameras are largely going to be inside for today's video, so you're not going to have any stellar B-roll, I'm afraid. You're just going to have to listen to me talking for most of it. But as I said, down at the harbour, 76 and 77 is the era of the Carrera 3-litre. And it is a really interesting part of Porsche history. Why it was interesting was, on paper, the Carrera 3 was down on power compared to its predecessor, but this really signified a time of great change for the 911 because until this moment, the Carrera was instilled at the very top of the 911 tree. Think the Carrera RS of 1973 and even the 2.7 Carrera of 74. That was an RS engine, by the way, and I've done a video on that previously. I'll drop a link here. But by 1975, the 911 Turbo had come along, and that now sat at the top of the 911 tree. Now, the introduction of that turbo caused Porsche to have a bit of a rethink, witnessed by the fact that the Carrera, this car, was moving away from that purebred race car 911 into something a little bit more touring focused, really. Yes, it was down on power, 200 compared to 210 of the 2.7, but the Carrera 3 was up on torque. And again, it just fits in with the fact that this is more of a grand tourer for all occasions. So I mentioned the 911 turbo was also in the range by the time this car came out. Well, the engine in this car, the Carrera 3 litre, is basically the 930's engine without the turbocharger. The fan, 5-blade form as here, is the same diameter as the 11-blade fan before and after. It just runs at a higher speed. So 3 litre, the turbo's engine without the turbocharger. It also uses the Cagetronic injection system, which replaced the mechanical fuel injection system. The K-Jet system, as it's colloquially known, is more sophisticated, really, providing better MPG and it's better on emissions as well. Now, within the impact bumper sphere, there are lots of variations model year to model year, okay? You have to be a real Porsche nerd to understand and know all of them. Now, I don't want you lot zoning out and losing interest, so we're just going to cover top level, the main changes for 1976 and 77, okay? 1976 was the birth of elephant ear external mirrors. They were electrically adjustable and heated. The chassis as well, that was hot dip zinc coated, basically much better rust protection. 1976 was optional on the 911, standard equipment on the Carrera 3 litre, this automatic climate control, which is what this function or this thing down here is, and also what this thing is for here. 1977, perhaps the biggest thing you'll notice is in the dash, we finally got vents in the centre of the dash. That was part of the air conditioning system. Elsewhere, the door cards, they were carpeted along the bottom. There was a new stitching pattern on the door card. And also this new locking mechanism came into play, which reduced the probability of your car getting nicked. The Carrera 3 got black window trim, and very subtly, the rear arches had a slightly chunkier profile to accommodate wider rear tyres. So that deals with the model years. In terms of the models themselves, there are only 2 from the naturally aspirated 911 lineup, as I mentioned earlier. They came within 2 body styles. We were way off the Cabriolet at this point, so it was just the Coupe and the Targa. Now the Carrera was around 10,000 Deutschmarks more than the entry-level 911. The Targa was around 2,500 Deutschmarks more than the Coupe. So a Carrera 3 litre Targa, such as this, outside the turbo, was the most expensive 911 you could buy. So what's it like to drive, I guess? Well, brilliant is the short answer. This car, there we go, let's stay in that torque band. I'm so gutted it's raining. These cars are just so much better with the roof down, aren't they? Do love a classic Targa, but they are a million times better with the roof down. It's got a really nice sounding exhaust to this. The guys at Phil Raby did mention that, and it does sound nice. Classic impact bumper, really. Dainty narrow body. Those front gun barrel fenders handily pointing out where the tyres are, so great for placing this narrow body 911 on the road. Good communicative feel. I mean, this car has the Bilstein Sport shocks and dampers, which does give some added focus, but a really good, fun, enjoyable car to use on the public road. What is this guy doing? I am going to have to bin you off, mate. Look, a couple of things with the Carrera 3 litre, just having a little drive here. Number one is how lightweight it feels, particularly in comparison to later impact bumper 911s like the Carrera 3.2. You can really feel it through the wheel on this, just feels more nimble. The other point to note with the Carrera 3 litre is the power delivery and how that's changed over the 2.7 litre Carrera before it. As we know, this car was down on power but up on torque in comparison to its predecessor. How does that translate onto the road? Well, it's just a smoother power delivery, basically. And that has a lot to do with the K-Jetronic, don't know why I struggled to say that, injection system, which is different to the Bosch MFI mechanical fuel injection that the 2.7 Carrera had. That plays a big role in how this car drives and how it behaves as more of a Grand Tourer. Just smoother, ultimately easier and more pleasant to drive. So this is the story of the Carrera 3. I have to say a big thanks to the guys at Philip Raby for letting me drive this car. It is actually sold, it's being collected next week. I'm just helping out with the snagging process because the guys at Philip Raby have basically commissioned glass out respray of the car and an engine rebuild. By their own admission, it's one of those classic 911 restorations that starts off small and ends up snowballing into this, which is basically a 911 ready to go and ready to be enjoyed.
After just 2 short years, these cars were replaced by the ubiquitous SC. However, rare in numbers, unique in spec, the Carrera 3 litre represents a quirky couple of years not only of the impact bumper era, but of the entire 911 dynasty.